Hi. Are you? Waiting. We're too early, or what is happening? Oh, you've been waiting. Oh yeah. Okay, so you just wait, right? For the. Yeah. So we got to- Survive this night. You too? Boston. Though it's not so far. It's 3.5 hours. That's just yeah, Zala. From the World Bank. They visited us. We gave them the tour. It was really okay.
Oh, G7.
Give them tour it. You should be the one giving the tour. I'm an HMS. I'm into research. Washington, there was not other than me. No, it's just yeah, right. That's right. Okay, let's do this. Very easy.
Please write something.
Yes. Monique Jackson.
Thank you.
So nice to see you. Thank you guys. It's so to meet you in person. You didn't meet me in person before.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing it as well. I did not learn. Of course. What way you want to read? Start. Yes, yes, yes. I get it.
Nice to meet you. Hi, Kareem. Nice to meet you. Chance, you know. No way. He knows. Jordan. Nice. We're neighbors. That's what it means. No way.
Yes.
Is it coming? She says. You have to let me know the middle one or Dima, okay. Overnight.
Oh.
Hold on.
Oh.
You're invited. Want to get 2 minutes? Ah, yeah.
Ninth floor of this. Okay.
That's where there's so many here from the yeah, but sort of yeah. Oh, you. You went together. Immediately. We're in the You're from fine. Yeah, good.
Yes, yes, I'm going to change. He also came to do
Just cool.
Yes.
Show the. After me, they were like. Okay, yes.
So are you sitting on there?
Easy one. Yeah. But we're responsible for the strategy topics. Yeah. Those strategies.
Yeah, you went to. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Alright. Janil. Oh, okay.
Oh my goodness, no, no. How are you?
Yes, yes, I get
sugar.
No.
I think I was pronouncing your name correctly. Thank you for coming. There is, so everyone.
Is that a man again? Long time? Yeah, thanks.
So now I'm with you.
How are you?
Remember I was.
Okay. Yes, yes. I didn't know there was none.
Yeah, hi. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Forward to. Hi. I know.
Did you?
Yeah, much easily studied.
You know him. Listen, yeah, you know him.
Hi, how are you doing? I'm Tommy Lowe.
We have system
Ambassador.
Yeah. I'm also.
Good to see you. But yeah. Good. Well, I think I'm going on holiday.
I'll show you how to do
We should be done by then.
Yeah. But if you're not,
We want to hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
She will be the QA.
my glasses are very important.
As a kid. Thank you for
See you not definitely the other button center. Yeah, just get that. Hi, how are you?
Hello, everyone. Can I invite you to take a seat with your plates? Yes. So we can enjoy as we move along with the agenda, so we don't delay, right? Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you all for coming, excellencies and colleagues and partners and distinguished guests. This is for us a real honor to welcome you here at this very timely and important event, discussing or having exchanges of innovative solutions for debt relief and sharing country experiences and the role of South-South and triangular cooperation, which we are organizing jointly with the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation under the leadership and the presidency of the Permanent Representation of Sri Lanka. Thank you, Ambassador, for being with us. And together we do have a shared purpose to discuss the critical issue of debt distress that impacts many countries in the Global South and to share innovative approaches and experiences on addressing this issue from a few countries' perspective in the Global South. As we all know, debt distress is a pressing challenge that affects numerous countries across Africa, Latin America, and Asia. And according to UNCTAD, the external debt stocks of developing countries have surged to an alarming 11.4 trillion in 2023, more than double of what it was a decade ago. And this growing burden, exacerbated by economic shocks and the current international financial architecture, significantly hinders sustainable development. According to recent 2024 UN reports, the global public debt has reached a record of 97 trillion, with developing countries accounting for nearly 30% of this record. A total of 54 countries, or almost 40% of the developing world, are in serious debt distress, dedicating at least 10% of their government funds to debt interest payments. And these consequences are dire. Countries are compelled to divert essential funds from health, education, and infrastructure to service their debt, affecting millions of lives. We estimate that currently 3.3 billion people live in countries that spend more on interest payments than on education and health. The implication, of course, of debt distress is on sustainable development very profound, and it's leading countries to prioritize debt repayments over critical investments necessary to achieve the SDGs. The least developed countries and the small island states are particularly impacted in debt distress. And according to UNCTAD, in 2022, LDC's government revenue servicing debt tripled from 6.3% in 2012 to 17% public debt in SIDS has nearly doubled to 82 billion since 2010. With nearly half of these countries on the verge of default or already grappling with unsustainable debt levels. And these countries face unique vulnerabilities due to their small economies, high exposure to external shocks, impacts of climate change, and limited access to financial markets, making debt relief and sustainable financial management all more critical. It's important also to acknowledge that the current international financial architecture does not commensurate with today's economic realities and is exacerbating the issue of debt distress. This was underscored also during the Third South Summit by the member states, and it's also been the case in every international fora and conference that we have been witnessing so far. The UN Secretary General has also called for ambitious reform of the international financial architecture to ensure its structure to support the SDGs and human rights through more inclusive, representative, and ultimately more effective global economic governance. And this is where South-South cooperation and Triangle cooperation play a transformative role by leveraging the collective strengths, knowledge, experiences, and resources of countries in the Global South. We can develop and scale up innovation solutions to mitigate the impact of debt distress. South-South cooperation, of course, driven by solidarity among the countries of the Global South, offer a dynamic platform for countries to exchange successes and tackle challenges collaboratively in a non-prescriptive manner. And this model of cooperation has significantly boosted economic flows among the, economic output, enhancing trade and increasing investments, financial and technological flows among developing countries. These achievements have been instrumental also in lifting people out of poverty and generating decent jobs. More can be talked about. I don't want to be talking a lot. I know that today's discussion will showcase how some of the solutions are addressing the debt distress. And this is a direct response to the UN General Assembly resolution on South-South cooperation at the 78th session. So we're very happy to join forces with the high-level, with the Bureau of the High-Level Committee on South-South cooperation. And also, we do have an esteemed panel of distinguished speakers and discussants who will share their insights. It will highlight the innovative approaches and solutions, but it will also provide recommendations as we approach the Summit of the Future and the upcoming Financing for Development Conference next year. So our goal is to contribute to the global conversation on debt relief, ensuring that the voices and experiences of the Global South are heard and integrated in policy debates and intergovernmental processes. So with this, I want to give the floor to our president of the high-level committee so he could kick us off on this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Dima. Representatives, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, both those present with us here and are with us online. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My dear friends, in my capacity as the incumbent president of the High-Level Committee of South-South Cooperation, I'm happy to welcome you to this event on the sidelines of the High-Level Political Forums on Sustainable Development. Permit me the pleasure of thanking the UN Office of South-South Cooperation, led by its indefatigable director, for their efforts in organizing this event. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the subject of focus in this side event is very relevant to many countries of the Global South who are facing a financial crisis. It's virtually the buzzword in debt distress. The heavy burden of mounting debt has become one of the most difficult hurdles for developing nations to address the crisis of climate change, alleviation of poverty, and our quest for economic development. The total extent, at the risk of traversing some of the ground that figures that Dima spoke to you just now, as I will remind you again that the total external debt of 118 low and middle income countries doubled to 3.1 trillion in 2022, from 1.5 trillion in 2010, rising to about 15% of their GDP. Now, the amount of finance required to meet their debt payments have also increased as a result. In 2022, developing nations spent 443 billion to service their public debt, according to the World Bank's International Debt Report. Now, this number will be overtaken soon, as 2024 is projected to be the costliest debt service year in this century, according, of course, again to the Debt Relief for Green and Inclusive Recovery, which focuses on the linkages between debt distress and climate change. A grim picture, isn't it? So, fueled by inflation, my dear friends, high interest rates, energy crisis, and the economic uncertainty after COVID, the implications of all-time high debt service payments are alarming, shrinking the fiscal space for developing countries to scale up investment in climate and sustainable development. As the ST was pleased to observe, about 52 developing countries, as Dima quite rightly said, are backsliding towards default as a major proportion of their income is appropriated to servicing debt, little for basic living, little for basic services, and surely little or none perhaps for development. My dear friends, this liquidity crunch is precipitating a situation where climate and environment has to be relegated to the back burner, even though inaction in these two areas are predictably poses risks. Now, the inability of developing countries to protect themselves against the vagaries of global warming due to fiscal constraints has ramifications beyond national and regional boundaries. It is risking sustainable development and compounding the global crisis of poverty, of climate, food insecurity, water, clean air, energy, and health. The world cannot afford this. The planet cannot afford this. Certainly, we in the global south cannot stand and wait much longer. Then, million-dollar question. Can South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation respond to the cry of developing nations, I ask, Director, and offer a sustainable solution? Can there be a short-term solution, or what will be perhaps a long-term solution? Now, these are questions that need to be answered as one of urgency. My dear friends, if one surveys the canvas of options, immediate debt relief is one, which frees fiscal space for climate and development. Lowering the cost of borrowing and extending long-term loans provide another form of relief. Now, debt swaps for climate and nature are also considered a win-win, where creditors are expected to forego existing debt in return for climate or nature-related actions and policies. So, invoking the polluter pays principle again, the V20, a group of 68 climate vulnerable countries, has proposed imposing a carbon tax on major economies to mobilize finance for sustainable investments. So, established some 80 years ago, the international financial system is confronted, I say, today by challenges posed by climate change. Its strict conditionalities, as we know, make access to funds difficult for those who need it most. And its old mechanisms, as the director was pleased to observe, have failed to come up with innovative formulae to rescue emerging and developing economies in a sustainable manner. The Secretary General has called a complete overhaul of the financial architecture, which he has been often saying it's morally bankrupt for its failure to respond to new challenges. The Bridgetown Initiative has also tabled a number of proposals to revamp the global financial system. So, accepting, my dear friends, the reality that the reform process will take time to unfold, the Secretary General, of course, has suggested we have the stimulus package of 500 billion a year in 3 priority areas, tackling the high cost of debt and risking the risks of debt distress, massively scaling up long-term financing for development through public development banks, including multilateral development banks, and expanding contingency financing for countries in need. So while climate action is now part of the economic policy making nationally, international financial mechanisms are yet to effectively respond to developing nations' funding needs. So removing the burdensome debt, as someone was asking, will allow countries to invest in their people and their future. Aren't we entitled to do that? Now, this must be done without delay. As someone said, that anything less will blow the climate debt trap into a climate death trap for the world's poor. So Sri Lanka, perhaps on our part, can offer one viewpoint of how the shock of financial distress can result in economies hemorrhaging and consequently to society and political spheres directly. It might interest you to know that just last week, Sri Lanka's president announced a debt restructuring arrangement with bilateral creditors, which marks a key step in the country's economic recovery. The deal is expected to reopen the doors to bilateral transactions and the resumption of foreign projects. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, these are staggering numbers and staggering facts staring in our face. It is one of the direct results of the inequality built into our outdated global financial system. And it demands that we review the system that is in place today. We must continue to discuss public debt and its nexus to SDGs and global goals. Excellencies, we need to come up with innovative solutions to address this situation. Innovative debt instruments must be geared towards helping countries to enhance fiscal space, support investments in SDGs and climate action, and provide, I say, breathing space to countries facing these shocks. So in this context, it is imperative that South-South cooperation prioritize the building of trust and reignite the meaningful Southern solidarity by using our collective power to forge ahead, to do all that we can to deliver the future we want by regaining lost momentum and stability towards sustainable development and a more stable, equitable financial structure. Now, in doing so, permit me to name a few. We need to enhance trade among developing countries. In other words, economic collaboration and trade. Investment in infrastructure. South-South investment in infrastructure can improve productivity and economic competitiveness. We must, developing countries, share expertise and technology in areas such as financial management. Now, the sharing of knowledge and technology. Next, I would have thought of financial mechanisms. Regional development banks, institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the New Development Bank can provide financing at more favorable terms than traditional lenders, reduce the debt service burden. Debt swaps, innovative financial instruments, such as debt for development swaps, can be employed. Then we can also think of policy coordination and advocacy, collective bargaining, in other words. Developing countries must and can form alliances to collectively negotiate better terms with creditors, leveraging their collective strength and to achieve more favorable conditions. In other words, policy alignment by policies that create common frameworks for debt management. Then we need the diversification of economic resilience. I believe that South-South cooperation can help countries diversify their economies by sharing experiences and strategies in sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, and services. Regional integration is another aspect that we can consider. So there we are. By leveraging these mechanisms, I believe that South-South cooperation can provide a comprehensive and sustainable approach to alleviating the debt burden of developing countries, promoting economic stability and long-term growth. So towards this end, we have with us here speakers from the global South countries as well as our developed partners. Through these speakers, my dear friends, and the ensuing discussion, it is hoped to spark a discussion of innovative solutions for debt relief, the potential for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation to be effective in achieving global development goals and enhance the understanding of the contribution of such cooperation. To begin this discourse, I invite our moderator, Ms. Carita White, the Deputy Permanent Representative of the Barbados, to take the floor. Carita, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency and Ms. Dima Al-Khatib. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Carita White, and I am the Deputy Permanent Representative of Barbados here to the UN. And I will be moderating the panel this afternoon. So just to build on what His Excellency would have said, some key phrases to think about: innovative solutions, moving the climate debt trap, so it doesn't become a death trap. And these are some things to think about. This meeting takes place at a very critical time. We just would have finished silence on the multi-dimensional vulnerability index. That's something that is going to be critical to not just small island developing states, but those countries which have these vulnerabilities, and looking at accessing critical finance and unlocking finance. We also have the Summit of the Future that's coming up later this year. We also have the PrepCom for the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, which takes place in Addis later this month. So some of these discussions, some of these talking points that we hear today, some of these solutions, sharing points, self collaboration that we're going to hear this afternoon could be used and can be used to take forward into some of these processes. So no pressure on any of the panelists, and without further ado, just to invite you and to introduce some of the panelists we have here this afternoon. So we have His Excellency and my CARICOM Caribbean colleague, his Ambassador Stan Smith, permanent representative of the Bahamas to the UN. We have Mrs. Gabriela Gonzalez, Minister Counselor and DPR of Uruguay to the UN. We also have Mr. Punkas Bajuri Ali, who is the Senior Advisor to the Minister on Social Affairs and Poverty Reduction in the Ministry of National Development Planning of Indonesia, and the head of Indonesia's National SDGs Secretariat. And we also have Mr. Fred Sosonga, First Counselor with the Permanent Mission of Rwanda here at New York to the UN. And each panelist will have 7 minutes for their interventions. And I will begin by asking specific questions to each of our panelists about their country's experiences and innovative solutions for debt relief and mitigation efforts, and the vital role of self and triangular cooperation. So I'll begin with Ambassador Smith of the Bahamas. And so the Bahamas has made significant strides in improving its public debt management with the passing of the Public Debt Management Act in 2021. This act provides a comprehensive framework for managing the country's public debt, and is one of the key achievements of the Strengthening Public Debt Management Framework and Developing Government Bond Market in the Bahamas project, supported by the India UN Partnership Development Fund. So 2 questions for you, Ambassador Smith, if I may. 1, how has this act improved transparency, accountability, and efficiency in managing the Bahamas public debt? And what impact has this had on the country's fiscal health and economic stability? That's the first question. The second question, can you also discuss other key achievements of the project that have fostered sound debt management practices? And that's 7 minutes, Ambassador. Please take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. 7 minutes is long. Immediately when I think of debt management in the Bahamas, I'm going to refer to 2 days in 2015 and 2017. They have a superficial political tension in them that serve as a kind of an allegory for the value of a public debt management instrument to support development in small states. But before I do that, I would like to thank the producers and hosts of this program, and take the opportunity to thank the United Nations Office of South-South Cooperation for its formulation of the project, strengthening the public debt management framework and developing the government bond market in the Bahamas. It has had a profound impact on the development model in the country. And I'd like to also thank the India UN Partnership Development Fund and the Commonwealth Secretariat, who provides a great deal of expertise on the ground in the Bahamas for their principal and timely funding, together with contribution by the Bahamas Central Bank on this project. Now, in recognizing the Trust Fund Management Secretariat, I'd like to say thank you very much for work that you do behind the scenes in the Bahamas. We truly appreciate the work that you do. Now, how did the Bahamas get where we are in the position we're in? Adam Tooze, who's a professor of European Studies at Columbia University, he addressed the Bahamas' development model in Foreign Policy magazine in January of last year. And he identified tourism, financial services, and foreign home ownership. And he said, these things, with the onset of climate change in the way that we are seeing it, they have imposed the necessity of a new model on small states like the Bahamas. You will not enjoy the natural advantages that you've had up to this time, and you're going to have to find a new development model. Where does that leave us? I'll tell you. Our National Development Plan gave us some data. In 1998, wages, benefits, and rents from financial services amounted to $600 million. And that declined by 2016 to $97 million. There's some geopolitical and geoeconomic dynamics that interfered with that, but we moved from $600 million a year to $97 million only a few years ago. We know what the recession of 2008 and the pandemic economy did to small states, and that has imposed the necessity of creating a new development model for the Bahamas. So, to return to your question about transparency, efficiency, and accountability as framed by the Act, when we bridge 2015 and 2017 in the Bahamas, this is the value of an act like this on the Bahamas. In 2015, we enacted VAT, value-added tax. First time we did it. And in 2017, we had an election. And the administration that became the new administration, when they did their polling, the information they got was that the then government that implemented VAT had not had a very effective, clear, according to the polling, a very effective, clear administration of VAT revenue. And this was one of the critical national issues at the time. Well, that administration lost the election, notwithstanding the excellent performance of the VAT administration. And so it leads me to the value of an act like this. The act really for us has been very catalytic, and it has helped us to build. In these ways, we have formed a dedicated structure within the Ministry of Finance to better manage public debt, as well as prepare and facilitate the adoption of key legislation and of internal guidelines, processes, and tools. There are a number of things we had to do together with implementing the Act. I should refer to the enhancement of the Act with the introduction of a comprehensive framework for managing the country's debt with an interagency agreement that had to be created between the central bank and the Ministry of Finance, just to deal with a coordination of monetary policy and debt activities. The Debt Management Office also established between government and the development partners in 2022 a kind of a cornerstone for how we were going to deal with debt in the country. It gives discipline to and facilitates the execution of both dimensions of government's finance productivity. That's productivity through technical expertise, on the integrity of our finance infrastructure internally in the country and in our engagement with international institutions, and productivity in giving robustness and relevant flexibility to substantive finance products and related considerations. Now, that architecture being built since 2021 is fostering sound debt management practices, improving debt transparency, and the market for government debt. Aims at deepening the domestic bond market and promotes long-term debt sustainability. You have to let me know what time I have. But we are building capacities to bridge market infrastructure gaps in government securities that are intended to enable efficient price discovery in government securities and developing secondary market liquidity in government securities. Our assessment really has been that we've been able to better understand and implement changes on how to better price bonds, how to improve market supply and demand, while improving the auction for government bonds. These policies and legislative changes enable us to build efficient systems for the long haul to benefit lower transaction costs and improved access to affordable finance in the future. I'm going to skip through some of the considerations that I thought might come up in my giving these considerations. The ultimate success has been this. Generally, the country's fiscal health has been the better for it. Notably, with respect to the debt to GDP metric from 2021 pandemic impact, which was about 99.83% of debt to GDP. Provisional data projects that our debt has decreased to 78.1% of GDP in fiscal year 2023 to 2024. And the government is currently targeting debt to GDP ratio decline 65% by the 2026-2027 fiscal year. I would like to credit the commitment of the project team with the Commonwealth Secretariat for its technical expertise in supporting us, and UNDP for its continued oversight of our country agenda. There's vastly more than I can say. I understand the time constraint. I will add only this, which is a cultural point. Many of you who have expertise in this area will understand a lot of things that a small state will do to try to bolster debt activity resilience. Why did the Bahamas come so late to this kind of programming? I've learned recently that, and I've been generally aware of our history, but it is something that you should understand about the good fortune some small states have had. In about 1911, Canada was considering making the Bahamas its 11th province because of the wealth that the Bahamas had generated for Canada. Between the 1930s and the mid-1960s, the Bahamas was home to the wealthiest person in the world at one time, Sir Harry Oakes. And he and a group of Canadians who were generating about 15% of Canada's economy, they housed themselves in the Bahamas. And they were responsible for a significant portion of the country's stability and resilience economically. What Adam Tooze is referring to is that that period is gone. But that kind of history, with that kind of institutional support, has been a great benefit, and these things have changed. And it leaves us in this position to seek these innovations that we now come to. So thank you very much. I'd be happy to contribute further to the stage of the discussion.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Smith. Are there any Canadians with us in the room this afternoon who might want to just build on what he said? But thank you so much for using the example of the Bahamas and 600 million to 96 million. These are things that we could go on for quite a while about. And thank you once again. We now move to Mrs. Gabriela Gonzalez, Minister Counselor and DPR of Uruguay to the UN. In 2022, Uruguay issued its first sovereign sustainability-linked bond, SSLB, linking the country's debt payments to climate and nature-based goals, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions and increasing forest cover. So one, a question that I have, how has the issuance of the SSLB helped Uruguay manage its debt more sustainably? And what progress has been made toward achieving the environmental targets associated with the bond? The second question, the second question, what impact has the SSLB had on investor confidence and Uruguay's economic stability? And what lessons can be drawn from this experience to guide other countries considering similar debt instruments? So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for having me this lunchtime. And of course, the South Office, my colleague from Sri Lanka, and all the excellent and different panel that I have by my side. First of all, I would like to put the question in context because it's not an easy matter to talk about bonds and stuff. I'm a diplomat and not an expert so deep in finance. So I will tell how was that happened in Uruguay and which institution has participated in it and make it possible. In 2012, we started this matter, but the government wasn't ready for that. Actually, not very interested, I have to say. It was a decision that had to evolve in time. And there was two key institutions, because we're here talking about triangular cooperation that's between South countries and also UN system and other organizations that make it possible. And was UNDP, and also, as my colleague mentioned, that the Regional Development Bank have a key issue on these matters. So they approached the UNDP, approached the government. It was after right after Pyrene de Pandemia. The country was all around the world was kind of messy, and of course the economic finance wasn't very sure about to do it because there's a lot of indicators that don't not depend on them. You can't control them, and of course, an administration want to be successful, but this take another thing that cooperation is very important is the learning and teach the team of the government and the administration how to do this new element that is like this type of bonus, especially because you were never been done before. It was certain experience in Chile, Mexico, and other countries in the region. So also the figure of the resident coordinator was very important. They convinced at the end our Minister of Finance to work on this matter, and when 5 ministers worked together. It was finance, agriculture, industry, foreign affairs, and of course the Ministry of Environment. The work was together because the stability, of course, of the policies in our country and the alignment that we did with this new figure that we're going to use in finance that make it possible and successful. And now I'm going to go to some technical matters, why also this work and help us to be in a better position. In 2022 also, at the same time, Uruguay assumed the presidency of the World Bank International Monetary Fund and Development Committee. So it was a good opportunity for us to advocate for a new financial instrument that provide countries with the right incentive to address global challenges. Uruguay, in that point, and for all the developing countries, emphasized the need to harness power and positive financial incentive to foster sustainable policies, differentiated the cost of loan according to countries' contribution to global and good, public good, such mitigating climate change, conserving natural capital and biodiversity. Financial instruments that can be scaled up and replicated internationally and that promote transparency and accountability in private commitments in all countries. The climate change indicator indexed by the bond issued by Uruguay is a concrete step where aligned, as I said before, the sovereign finance strategy with the climate and nature conservation commitments under the Paris Agreement. This milestone terms was possible because of the policies that we make aside. Regarding exactly how was affect and the result of these bonds, we have to remember that the bond was issued with fulfilling and the climate change and the native forest preservation goal established reward and penalty for over compliance or non-compliance with the preset environmental goals. The first indicators refer to the reduction at least of the 50 in greenhouse gas, the GHG, emission per real unit gross domestic product GDP by 2025 comparing to 1990. The second indicator refers to maintaining at least 100% of the area of native forest compared to 2012 with a target of 2025. According to the second report, the evolution and the bonus is 46 reduction in gross greenhouse gas emission intensity per unit of the real GDP was achieved in 2022 compared to 1990, the baseline. Gross emission decreased 4.1 in 22 compared to 21 as a result of a higher share of electricity generation from renewable resources and lower estimated nitrous oxide emission related to fertilizers used for crop production, offsetting the increase in fossil fuel consumption and land transport. And the performance indicator link of the native forest is 100% compared to 2012 baseline. And I think we can say that the results have been very successful. And we hope they go on that well. Of course, we have technical verification, external verification from the UN system, reports, and then you can see deeper online all these results and where, in which areas it has been made the investment is those bonds. I'm gonna go on to the second question that it was about what lesson be drawn from the experience to guide other countries considering similar instruments. The issuance of this type of bond, I make it shorter because it's very long, the name is Uruguay sovereign bond, SSB, has had a positive impact in investor confidence and economic stability. But also that go with of course, it had to be ownership of the country because the administration after the pandemic, as I said before, the focus into have good numbers, to have responsibility, and to offer in our region to make attractive for investors in general. And I think this type of tool make it more attractive. And I think it can be used in the South and you can address more than one SDGs with this type of tool that you can use in your economies. Saying by this approach attracted, according to the report that I have been reviewing, a diverse and large numbers of investors who focus in environmental, social, and governance criteria. The bond placed by this bond placed in the market has two associated objectives: to reduce the greenhouse emission by 50%, as I said, in 2025, and the other one it was to pay the 75% rate from 2027 until the maturity of the country must be meet this standard. Otherwise, the cost of paying the investor will be increased by 0.5 percentage point of each item. And the discount will be the same if there is an of each item in over compliance. It's very technical for me. I had to say that all is there's a lot of and deep studies that you can read that take a lot of work with the UNDP, a lot of work with other partners to share. Also, if we saw the South experience, we share the information also with our experience, like in Chile and Mexico, that they have done. And I think talking South cooperation is being on the UN table for a long time. We have a very good experience. I'm going out of the topic, but say that we have many partners
Just
here
wanted
for
to
South
Time constraints.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in the future, what we can share, I think it will be useful to share our experience with other countries and work with institutions. And of course, we need for that a strong institution like they work with us and other regions, the development banks, the developed countries also put an eye on this and can be partner of us having certain rentability. That is, I think that I see the future and how we can help other countries and work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Gonzalez, DPR Uruguay to the UN. And before I give the floor then to the last two panelists, please remember that you're more than welcome to have some discussions with our panelists after the event to dig deeper on some of the topics here today. And having said that, not to put any pressure on the last two panelists, but we are running a little behind time. So I would appreciate then if when you're taking the floor, instead of 7 minutes, if we could do 5 minutes or even less, if that's possible, no pressure. So having said that, I'll give the floor to Mr. Pungas Bujari Ali, Senior Advisor to the Ministry on Social Affairs and Poverty Reduction and for Indonesia. And sir, Indonesia is recognized as a leader in issuing Islamic sukuk bonds, which serve as an alternative to traditional financing instruments. These bonds adhere to Islamic financial principles and promote financial inclusion. So I have two questions for you. So the first question, how has the issuance of Islamic sukuk bonds contributed to diversifying Indonesia's debt portfolio and reducing the reliance on traditional debt instruments? And what has been the impact on overall debt sustainability? And the second and last question, what economic and social outcomes has Indonesia achieved through its sukuk issuance, and what best practices have emerged that could benefit other countries facing debt distress? Over to you, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity, Excellencies, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for me to share our knowledge and our experiences on the debt management. So my answer to your questions primarily focus on three things: on the fiscal policy for debt, then SDG financing management, and sukuk financial investment. I think these three will answer those two questions. Indonesia fiscal deficit has returned to pre-pandemic level. During the pandemic, our debt ratio was 6%, and now it's decreasing to less than 3%. So actually, by law, Indonesia has to maintain the level of state budget deficits not exceed 3%. And currently, I think this year we plan to have like maximum 2.8%. And the government debts not exceed to 60% of GDP. Currently, we're maintaining it at about 39% of GDP. I think these two regulations allow us to more on financing development in a more stable way. And some of this fund that we use from state budget, usually primarily for several mandatory expenses such as education, we have mandatory spending for 20% of our state budget for educations, and others for mostly for subsidy for the poor. Now on the Indonesia SDG financing strategy, we are trying to achieve the SDG by 2030, but we also have a new visions for Golden Indonesia 2045. So that needs a lot of money, and in doing so, we need to mobilize resources in addition to the state budget, because the state budget currently is only about 10% of GDP, and our GDP size is quite small compared to the population. So we need to mobilize resources from non-state budget. So we have to look at the beyond traditional multilateral, bilateral, and commercial loan. Indonesia actually became one of the pilot countries to implement international integrated national financing framework, the INFF, that we have adopted as umbrella for stakeholders in developing the enabling ecosystem in which innovative financing platform encouraged. and this to ensure participations by both government and non-state actors, especially by using some of these mechanisms. First, improve public spending. Second, fiscal policy reform and improve tax administrations. And third is improve incentive for local SDG adoption. We also promote like green banking, investments, blended financing, blue finance ecosystems, and mobilizing philanthropy and peer-based financings. Currently, Indonesia SDG finance ecosystem is comprised of a variety of financing strategies. I will mention four of them. First is the alignment to 47 priorities plan with SDGs. And then second, collaborate among the ministries and Indonesia Stock Exchange to mobilize and catalyze resources from private sector through the SDGs National Action Plan. Continue to support the financial authority services in developing sustainable taxonomy, and continues to work together with the Ministry of Finance in publishing SDGs bond, green sukuk, and to mobilize financing. So now, but your questions about the Islamic financings, the potential of Islamic financing is quite significant in Indonesia because we have a high populations of Muslims there. About 80% of the Indonesian population out of 260 million are Muslims. So this huge market for Islamic financing. And Indonesia has been active in issuing sukuk to fund infrastructure projects, support economic development, and manage financial obligations. We issue the global and retail green sukuk since 2018. And in 2021, we issued SDG bond for the first time, which comprised of green and blue, such as energy, climate change, waste management, and sustainable management, natural resources for land and oceans, as well as social focus, such as employment generations, socioeconomic empowerment, and food security and access to essential services. So we are currently also operationalizing the SDGs Financing Hub. It's basically a platform which investors can meet. So we curated the SDGs related projects, and they meet these two parties, supply and demand, together. And we found out that this is very prospective because the investor actually is quite big. Now they are also trying finding the project that is suitable with the SDGs. So our task is how to meet these two. And currently we are promoting regulations for this. We call it innovative financing. So basically financings outside the state budget. The SDG investment platform is established to connect SDG project with investors with digitalized platform, and we aim to ensure equal access of information to all stakeholders. Now, what the use of that green sukuk? There are 5 projects for this green sukuk, and one of the example of this funding is used for waste management, and then we will also light rail transits using this green sukuk, and then also solar panels in some area of Indonesia, as well as there's some restoration for the nature. So there are some examples of green sukuk that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pungas Ali, and for just highlighting the alternative to traditional financial instruments being used in Indonesia. And I now give the floor to our final panelist, Mr. Fred Sasonga, First Counselor, Permanent Mission of Rwanda to the UN. So Rwanda has implemented a medium-term debt management strategy, MTDS, to ensure debt sustainability while supporting critical infrastructure projects. This strategy includes prudent borrowing and effective risk management measures to maintain a manageable debt level. Could you share your perspectives on the following? 1, how does Rwanda's medium-term debt management strategy ensure long-term sustainability while continuing to fund critical infrastructural projects? And what specific measures have been most effective in maintaining a manageable debt level? And 2, what results have been observed since the implementation of the MTDS in terms of debt reduction and economic growth, and what future plans does Rwanda have to enhance this strategy further? Over to you, sir, and the time crunch is on, and I'm so sorry. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to be short. I'm not an economist. I'm a simple lawyer, I'm a journalist. So I will not go to the details of the numbers and the figures. So I will just say, talk about what I see as a Rwandan citizen and how we have managed to reach here. Excellencies, colleagues, we have not recovered, been relieved of the debt stress, but we are managing the stress. As you know, Rwanda is still a developing country, but we are trying to manage this stress, this stress. Our experience is not a miracle, but simply a choice we have made because of our history. No, after the 1994 genocide, we inherited a country that had zero, the economy was at zero level. So it was like having a devastated economy. So what we had to do, we had to make a choice. Our choice was to use less and achieve more. And since we had to triple the speed of everyone, so we have to say that now, this is not a business as usual. We have to move faster than expected. But the current progress actually is premised on one important pillar that we tend to ignore when we are talking about this, the pillar of good governance. This good governance we have tried to enforce in our country has actually enforced accountability and effective planning. So how do we use the little resources we have to borrow, that we have borrowed to serve the purpose? Well, first of all, we need to do the proper planning, and then that most envisages prioritization of areas where debt would be well used, like in public investment. Use the debt in public investment to generate more. And then effective use of resources, whereby you have to deliver the highest value with strict expenditures. Rwanda prioritizes concessional funding, and this typically has low. We get loan rates. These debts that actually have lower rates, lower interest rates, but again with long repayment period, like the bonds you have just mentioned. But then, how do you get these bonds? How do you attract these people to come? Because when you attract these people to come, they have to have assurances that you have stability. Because no one will come to buy bonds when you don't have stability. So number one task you have to do as a country as Rwanda, we have to put in place all the conducive environment that people have assurances that whatever they invest will be gained. But there's stability. They are sure that this government is secure. This government is stable. This government is not going anytime. So that is another pillar actually that is very important to have stability, and then you attract these investments, you attract these concessional loans that everyone is willing to come and invest because he's sure that you are there even in 20 years, even in 30 years. If you'll be dealing with the same government, you'll be dealing with the same people, you'll be dealing with the same conditions that actually are in place today. So our objective for debt management have been to ensure that the government financing needs and settling the obligation with the medium-term objective of low borrowing costs, and then to keep a prudent risk exposure, and of course promote the active domestic debt market premised on that study that I was talking about. I will try to skip others because I can see the time is against us. I would say that what have been the observed results, I'll just put it in one sentence. The observed results has been debt reduction with a steady economic growth. And then our future plans is to continue enhancing domestic market, domestic debt, active domestic debt market, and then maximizing concessional fundings, and then ensure that the ongoing efforts to manage this continue to be in place and ensure stability and transparency. You know, there's one thing that in concluding, I will not go without telling you about one success story in this management of debts. You know, we have a zero corruption policy. You know, even the little you borrow, sometimes you find when you have corruption, even the little you borrow ends up going to some people's pockets. But when you have this strict laws, strict policy of zero corruption, that also helps you. Well, you add confidence of those who want to lend you money, but also the little you borrow is spent productively. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sasonga, first counselor of Permanent Mission of Rwanda to the UN, and talking about the NTDS, good governance, debt sustainability, as well as linking it all to critical infrastructure. And thanks to all of the panelists for their insightful contributions. And we will now hear from our discussants who will provide additional perspectives and reflections on the issues discussed. Each discussant will have 3 to 4 minutes in their interventions. I'll lean more heavily on 3 minutes and 4 minutes. So the first discussant that we have with us is the DPR of Italy to the UN, His Excellency Ambassador Gianluca Greco. And Ambassador reflected on the insights and perspectives shared by the panelists. Could you elaborate on your views on the role of donors and partners in supporting countries in debt distress? Italy currently also holds the vice presidency of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation. This year is also holding the presidency of the G7, and it has focused on issues related to financing and debt. Could you provide some insights on initiatives undertaken to address debt-related challenges, sir? Thank you so much. 3 minutes, 3 to 4.
Yes, thank you so much. I will try to be as brief as possible. So thanks, of course, for inviting us. It has been very interesting to listen to these experiences. I will try, I will venture myself out of the notes that I have prepared so that I can be also shorter in time. I was struck by the fact, by the importance that information and transparency have played in all the interventions of the panelists. On one side, information for the financial markets. Any financial transaction, be private or public, needs the highest level of transparency. And this is something that we are seeing also in the post-pandemic Monetary Fund, World Bank, G20 activities that try to lead to a better debt management. We have been seeing this now with the global sovereign debt roundtables, where all the creditors just meet, try. All the creditors, this is important because we are not speaking anymore of traditional creditors. Now we have new creditors that are coming with different stories, with a different approach to lending. So the results that in the last few months, as far as I know, I'm not an economist as all of us, but as I understand, the results that have been achieved in these global sovereign debt roundtables have also facilitated the work of the common framework, where with the sign of the agreement with with Sri Lanka, so that the time that actually was very long after the pandemic, that was requested by the Common Framework to work and to find a new debt relief agreements with the country in big stress, now has been shortened a little bit. Actually, it's going towards those 2-3 months of negotiations that were the goal of this new tool of the financial institutions, of the creditors. So we are actually, it seems to me that we are going towards a situation where the time frame of the negotiation between creditors and the country in debt are getting more reasonable, and they can lead to better results. And again, Sri Lanka is the best example today, but we have also something good going on with Ethiopia and with some other countries. So again, the importance of transparency of information, and we are very proud as Italy to have been among the first to finance the integrated national financing frameworks through some instruments with the UNDP and with DESA, because again, the importance of rely on internal capacities of capacity building, and then following this road, the importance of the South-Side cooperation or triangular cooperation in order to share the experiences. As just last words on G7, because here I want to quote, because there was really a strong political engagement from the G7 when in the final declaration, the G7 leaders called for action from the international community, and here I quote, to address debt burdens, to evolve the international financial architecture to make it fit for the challenges of today's world, recognize that countries should not be forced to choose between fighting against poverty and protecting the planet or addressing global challenges, nor between repaying creditors and making further investments in development. So these were the key political messages. And again, the G7 wants to show the readiness in this regard and calls on the G20 to the implementation of the common framework for debt treatment beyond the Debt Service Special Initiative, the DSSI, that was the emergency brake that was used just after the pandemic. So in a framework where the figures are really worrying, as we heard, actually something is moving. And again, transparency, collaboration among creditors really is playing a major role. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and for highlighting what it is that Italy is doing as part of the G7 work ongoing. And you mentioned UNDP and collaboration that you have there. And we'll now give the floor then to Mr. Thomas Bello, Director of Sustainable Finance Hub in UNDP. And Mr. Bello, in 3 to 4 minutes, could you share UNDP's experience in supporting countries in the Global South in addressing and mitigating debt distress through innovative mechanisms and strategies, particularly via the Integrated National Financing Framework, or INFF, elaboration and implementation? Given UNDP's presence in over 170 countries and territories, could you please elaborate on how South-South and triangular cooperation is being utilized in this framework to achieve impactful results? Over to you, Mr. Bello.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks for the fantastic presentations. I mean, I've really learned a lot. I'll structure my remarks, if you will, in 3 to 4 minutes with 3 points. I think the agenda in front of us is about rethinking collaboration, particularly across finance institutions and development institutions. The second agenda for us is redesigning financial instruments to look at both development impact and fiscal impact. And the third area is really recalibrating our calculations of risk and return across the entire financial decision-making process to look at development and financial impact. Really, the Integrated National Financing Frameworks, and great thanks to our Italian colleagues for the support in the early stages. Really, the Integrated National Financing Frameworks are exactly about rethinking collaboration across development institutions and financial institutions. They're sovereign-led processes led by ministries of finance, but they're all about engaging with different stakeholders around the challenge of unlocking finance for sustainable development. There was one very astute Minister of Finance who once said, the business of financial decision-making is too important to be left to ministries of finance alone. And really that's what the Integrated National Financing Framework is about. Let me say, as I rapidly move through, that a lot of the instruments that we've been talking about, and it's fantastic, the presentations we've had, UNDP is really pleased to be part of those instruments, the design of those instruments. We come with a sustainable development focus, not the financial transaction focus that the development banks bring to those instruments. And again, that's a fusing of development expertise and sustainable development expertise. The Indonesian example, so this SDG government securities framework in Indonesia, which the government has put in place, has already mobilized $10 billion of debt. And you mentioned all the brilliant, the SDG bonds, green sukuk, blue bonds on a samurai market, so traded in Japan. And I heard earlier, potential orange bonds coming through as well. So putting these development frameworks in place really allows you to mobilize at scale finance for sustainable development. The Uruguay example is incredible for the way in which it links progress on the bond, the payment scale, to progress on NDC implementation, the key performance indicators of an NDC, National Determined Contribution on Climate Action. These really are examples of recalibrating finance and development into fused instruments. Let me just say, though, this is a small part of the market. The total bond market in the world is at about $133 trillion. The instruments we're talking about are still innovative instruments. What we really need to do is look at the entire debt management strategies of countries and reconsider how delayed investments, because of fiscal constraints, can create future macroeconomic and fiscal risk. By delayed expenditure in climate and social expenditures, you actually undermine your macro fiscal stability later on. This is perhaps the challenge we have in front of us. When it comes to South-South cooperation, my final point is absolutely critical that we use South-South cooperation to reduce the transaction costs of setting up these instruments. Uruguay can do that now on the sustainability-linked bond. Indonesia is already doing it around the SDG bond framework. There's much more we can do together. And finally, of course, working together, we do need to bring this focus to the discussion of the reform of the international finance architecture. We need to look at credit rating agencies, scrutinize them. Are the methodologies right for our time? Or do they need to look at development alongside financial risk? With that, stop.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bello, and thanks for bringing that interesting perspective as well and talking about the need for reform of the financial institutions. And also I like that comment you made about the work being too important to be left to the ministries of finance. And through the magic of technology, we will move online to our next speaker. His camera was just turned on, Mr. Daniel Titelman. I hope I pronounced the last name correctly, Director of the Economic Development Division of ECLAC, UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. And Mr. Titelman, could you share with us ECLAC's experience in implementing the Debt for Climate Adaptation Initiative and illustrate to us how many countries have been supported and what has been the outcome? Also, could you reflect on the role of South-South and triangular cooperation in facilitating exchanges and building country capacities? Over to you online, sir. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Yes.
thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very honored to participate in this panel, and I would like to thank all the panelists for putting on the table and bringing to our attention the need to address the urgency of addressing debt distress in order to be able to mobilize financial resources for climate change mitigation and adaptation. I would like to emphasize that in ECLAC, we've been arguing that debt distress can become an issue of development distress if we are not able to link, as was mentioned by some of my colleagues before, the need to reduce debt burdens or alleviate the financial burden of debt to development needs. And that's why we a few years ago, we made this proposal, what we call the Caribbean Resilience Fund. That was basically a proposal that tried to mix debt swaps for climate and create an investment fund that could help financing projects and investment needs for climate change adaptation and mitigation. These development debt swaps initiatives or the thematic bonds that have been discussed by the panelists are very important and innovative financial mechanisms in order to start addressing what we think is a key issue, is how our countries are going to be able to deal with the interest payment pressure that is taking away a lot of fiscal resources from very narrow fiscal space. So they're drawing resources away from development to serving debt, and that's why we need these new innovative financial mechanisms. And also how we're going to allow our countries to access financial markets at lower financial costs. Our estimation tells us that if we are not able to lower the financial cost, there will be no financial sustainability or fiscal sustainability in our country, so we will not be able to do and address the investment needs that addressing climate change issues require in terms of adaptation and mitigation. So there are two key issues: how we're going to reduce the debt burden and how we're going to be able to access to new financial resources at lower cost so we can have financial sustainability in our country. And in that sense, the examples that we have heard from the panelists are very important and very and give us a very good strategy to move forward. I would like to emphasize that in the case of the region, basically we have the experience of Belize, who did a debt climate swap that was very interesting, and it was in the lines of our proposals in terms of debt for nature and the Resilient Fund, where some of the savings will have to finance investment, in this case of for the ocean. Ecuador also did a debt relief issue in the last few years, which is also very interesting and a promising experience. I would like to emphasize to finish is that South-South cooperation is key in many areas. First, South-South cooperation can enhance our own capacity to mobilize financial resources. South countries today have a big economic presence, not only in terms of GDP, in terms of investment, but also in terms of their savings and their capacity to mobilize financial resources. So South-South cooperation can help to enhance our capacity to finance our investment needs. Also, South-South cooperation can help to keep building up debt swap models or different financial vehicles to lower the burden in many of our countries. Whenever we want to link debt relief to development, we're talking about investment. And investment needs not only financial resources, but also needs technical capacity to evaluate the project. It needs leverage triangular cooperation. It needs knowledge exchange. It needs innovative investment mechanisms, not only innovative financial mechanisms, particularly if we are discussing the huge need of addressing investment for climate adaptation and mitigation. So South-South and triangular cooperation can play a really important role in mobilizing financial resources, in producing financial resources at lower cost, but also in terms of solidarity, knowledge experience, knowledge exchange, and defining investment needs and investment projects for our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Teitelman, for talking about the Debt for Climate Adaptation Initiative and for highlighting what the work that's going on in my region, coming from Barbados, for Latin America and the Caribbean. So thank you so much. And we now give the floor to Mr. Amir Hamza Saeed, Associate Manager for Global Advocacy of the Islamic Development Bank, ISDB. And Mr. Amir, could you share your perspectives on ISDB's various initiatives and programs that focus on technical assistance and advisory services among your member countries? Additionally, we are also interested in understanding the vital role of South-South and Triangular cooperation in these initiatives. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by thanking UNSSC for putting together a fantastic panel, and as well as all the members for terrific presentations. I guess all of us learned a lot in a short time. Now, I'd like to make my intervention in two parts. First, I'd like to start by talking about the Islamic Development Bank. So we are a multilateral development bank that aims to foster economic development and social progress in 57 member countries. And all of our member countries are from the South. And we also work with the Muslim communities in the non-member countries. Now, South-South and Triangular cooperation is something which is very significant for us, and it has a lot of importance because it is a complementarity modality for development contribution, development cooperation that ISDB extends to its member countries. And as a part of that, we have various initiatives and mechanisms, and we are working with UNSSC very closely as well on these initiatives. Now, from the perspective of MDBs, I mean, indeed, MDBs are taking several steps in enhancing the debt management capacities of the member countries. And many of us of common knowledge are offering diverse set of innovative financing instruments to shareholders, to development partners, as well as in the capital markets. The one important thing, which this is where I would second Ambassador Mohan Paris, is about tackling the debt problem by extending loans at a lower cost. I think reducing the cost of borrowing is something which is going to be critical, and that has to be done through providing more concessional financing or even blended financing for that matter to the member countries. Now, coming back, on the initiatives that we have on the South-South and Triangular cooperation that you have asked. So we have the reverse linkage mechanism, which is a homegrown initiative within the Islamic Development Bank, which is a demand-driven and results-oriented approach that matches the needs of a beneficiary member country, which has proven solutions and expertise and evidence on ground. And we match that along with the co-financing of the Islamic Development Bank with the needs of the member countries which are requesting for the support. And we do this innovative mechanism not only for the member countries, but we also bring in the private sector as well as the civil society to bridge the development challenges and have sustainable solutions. So allow me to quote that we've achieved significant results and impact to the South-South and Triangular cooperation to our member countries. And by the end of 2023, and this program has been in work for almost 15 years now, we've supported 34 member countries to collaborate with each other in problem-solving projects. And these have vast expanse of both social projects as well as cross-cutting and thematic areas, and these projects have contributed to the development of socio-economic conditions and enhancement of institutional capacities in developing member countries. Now, one of the things that we're also doing is Thomas UNDP is we started working with UNDP as well on the INFF, and that's something that we started doing it from this year. And the technical team from both ISDB as well as UNDP have started to work on a couple of, we have something called member country partnership strategy, and UNDP has INFF. So we're trying to see how we can collaborate together and support a member country, and including issues which are of national development priorities and having, the financing, sustainable financing. As I conclude, I'd like to, state that, of course, we are closely working with the member countries, and we continue to, and we anticipate to leverage the potential of the development cooperation modalities that we have. And South-South cooperation is in our DNA of the bank. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Mr. Amir, and for highlighting the work ongoing with the ISDB. I'll now give the floor to my colleague, Dimitri from Russian Federation. Take it away, sir.
much. As a member of South Committee Bureau, would like to very briefly have a very bigger picture note and quite narrow picture example of what we're discussing. As far as the bigger picture, I think we all have to bear in mind that World War I and World War II, they all began during the debt crises. So the debt crises and the global scale, the appetite to write off all the debts is a really very dangerous point in terms of development of human history. So we have to fight by all means. So I want to thank Your Excellency and all the Bureau and all the delegates and speakers for their presentations. I think this is a very important topic. I also want to say that the G20 is devoting a lot of attention to addressing this issue. And now to the very narrow example of what Russia is doing. I mean, on top of very big efforts to write off the amount of about $20 billion to African countries, I want to just share an example of cooperation with WFP, what we did with Mozambique in the period of 2019-2022, when we cooperated with WFP and Mozambique, so that we were writing off their debt to us, and the money was transferred to WFP and used by the WFP for school feeding projects. It was a very successful project. People in schools happy, Mozambique is happy, we're happy, WFP is happy, so success story. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much to Dmitry, Russian Federation, who's also on the Bureau. So I think we are unfortunately plumb out of time, but I think you would also appreciate that we had an excellent discussion, rich discussion from the panelists as well as the discussants. And just wanted to say that now as we approach the end of our session, I would like to invite Ms. Dima Al-Khatib and Mr. Peter Pieris to provide the wrap-up remarks. Ms. Al-Khatib, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Karita, for this wonderful moderation. And let me also join you by thanking all the speakers. This has been definitely a rich discussion, and it definitely deserves much more time. What I would like to propose is that we use all of these country cases as examples, and we will upload them also on our website, so there is wider time for people to contemplate and look into these good examples. And a lot of those discussions also came up with good recommendations. I will pass it to His Excellency to talk more about what emanated from the discussions. But the important thing is that we make sure that we connect the dots. And why are we sharing those good examples and instruments is to be able to really come up with good suggestions as we move forward, whether at the global level and international forums, but also most importantly at the countries level and the regional levels. And these are important things to keep in mind as we move forward with, our different mandates. But from our side, we do definitely keep our commitment to creating these forums for the discussion of important subjects that are of high relevance to the countries of the South, to make sure that we use our knowledge platforms digitally, but also solutions that have been emanating. We will be soon rolling out what we call a South-South Solutions Lab, and that's very, very important. And also use our alliances, whether with the countries, with the RC system, with the UN system, to make sure that these good examples and the knowledge is flowing, right? And South-South cooperation and triangle cooperation, needless to say, they have been proven, that they are mechanisms that support and enhance the mobilization of resources, whether it's financial or technical. Sometimes technical and the sharing of experiences is much more important than anything else. And the country context is, of course, the lead in terms of, prescribing what we need to do. So from our side, as an office, we are committed to continue the dialogue, committed to maintain our knowledge platforms enriched with these discussions, and we will definitely post that as we move forward. I'm going to pass the floor to His Excellency for some of the insights that are captured from this discussion.
Thank you, Dima, for giving me the floor once again. My dear friends, I think we've had a rich discourse on this subject in the last few minutes, particularly from contributors to the topic. I must say that I wish we had a few more countries or with that philanthropic approach of the Russians to Mozambique. Most of our problems probably, we've been asking for a write-off of debt, but it has been falling on deaf ears. We have been asking for moratoriums, which we never got. We were asking for reduced interest rates. That too we didn't get. We borrow at 13% and we are given interest at 3% on our investments. Now that is the background in which we work. Now, one would ask the million-dollar question, how do you survive? Now, my dear friends, I think our problems begin, if I listen to this discourse very carefully, our problems of mounting debt began not yesterday. Our problems began with colonization. That's where it is. We lost our wealth to those occupiers of our countries. And now we are with the begging bowl going back to them to return our debt. That's one thing that I have actually realized in the whole discourse. Number one. Now, then, if I was to summarize this whole discussion in a few things, it's obvious that it is crucial to assess the country's ability to repay its debts without compromising its economic growth and development. Analyzing debt to GDP ratio, debt service ratio, and the country's fiscal capacity helps determine whether the debt burden is sustainable. In other words, we cannot be getting into arrangements which cannot be comfortably accommodated. It's like running our home. It's no different. If we live beyond our means, and if you get into a contract with me when I don't have the capacity to contract with you, the problems are obvious. It's no different. Secondly, debt relief should aim to alleviate poverty. And that's something that came out here. Promote social welfare. Improve the living conditions of the population. So I say it's important to consider how the debt burden affects essential sectors such as education, healthcare, infrastructure, and social services. Then another message is that debt relief measures should not jeopardize the overall macroeconomic stability of the country. That's very important. In other words, evaluating factors such as inflation rates, exchange rates, fiscal deficits, and monetary policies helps ensure that the debt relief does not lead to economic instability. In other words, the prescriptions from the lenders can't be worse than the situation that we are in. We might not borrow. It may be better to remain poor. In other words, good governance and transparency. Now that's another thing that it is crucial, my dear friends, that we consider the country's governance practices and transparency in financial management. I think it's a sine qua non. Debt relief should be provided to countries that demonstrate responsible governance. It's like giving money to a kid who probably doesn't know how to spend his money. And transparency managing their finances. Debt relief, again, should align that with countries' poverty reduction strategies and development goals. It should support initiatives that promote inclusive growth, reduce income inequality, and improve social and economic opportunities for the most vulnerable of the population. Then, another aspect that was highlighted was the collaboration between debtor countries, creditors, and international financial institutions. Now, that is essential, I say, because for effective debt relief, that perhaps the collaboration between debtor countries and creditors is a must. Coordinating efforts, fostering dialogue, and ensuring fair and equitable treatment among creditors are important factors to consider. And finally, the moral hazard. While providing debt relief, my dear friends, it is important to strike, I say, a balance addressing the debt burden and promoting responsible borrowing and lending practices. Responsible borrowing and lending practices. Measures should be in place to discourage moral hazard and ensure that future borrowing is done responsibly. If we have learned something out of this, if there's one lesson to learn, is that we must borrow responsibly, and perhaps the lenders should lend responsibly. In other words, it must be a symbiotic relationship for the benefit of the giver and the receiver. So by considering these factors, what emerged here is that all these factors, debt relief efforts can be tailored to the specific needs and circumstances of developing countries. We cannot be classed in the same basket. We are not similarly circumstanced. In other words, but the simple procedure, equals cannot be treated unequally, and unequals cannot be treated equally. That's the formula. So it needs to be tailored to meet the specific needs of circumstances of our developing countries, promoting sustainable development and economic stability. I think that perhaps, in a few words, summarizes what we've been discussing. And thank you very much for this great discourse that we've had, and the speakers who contributed, and Peter who moderated this session with such efficiency. Thank you very much for my fellow moderator, fellow panelists, and to Dima, of course, for the great job that has been done with the South-South Cooperation team, which is ever ready and perhaps off the blocks very quickly to try and enhance the status of South-South Cooperation. And I hope that this will not end with just these rhetorical statements that we make here, that we can translate the rhetoric into real life action. And I hope the next time we meet, we can say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much, Ms. Al-Khatib, and thank you, Your Excellency. And this concludes our event this afternoon. And just wanted to thank our speakers, discussants, and you, the participants, for your valuable contributions. And let us continue to work together to find innovative solutions for debt relief through self, and triangular cooperation. Thank you and have a great day. And one note of housekeeping, I believe that the speakers and discussants are all going to try to have a picture. So feel free to stick around after the picture to ask any questions that you might want to ask before heading to your next session. So thank you so much once again. Have a great one.
If you let me. No, it says for the participant and the delegates that you can find all the information of the guidance of the several SDG bonds in one report that you can share with your country. And in more details, you can have all the report that UNDP does on these bonds also, because it's gonna be more clear. And you can done my presentation and we'll be, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You did good. Great.
Can be seen from wherever you are.
Yes.
Yeah. Have a good background.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Cheers. Can I take it? Who's taking the picture? Yeah.
Is that the bodyguard?
Yeah, he is.
Closer. So they're pretty fast. Got to go closer.
Are we captured?
Yeah.
I know that.
Which one we got just the eye?
Oh, you don't look at me.
Uruguay and Rwanda, thank you very much.
No, thank you to you. And I have a
Yes.
meeting.
Yes, we
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Good, all good? Yes.
Mariana is coming. So.
Yeah,
You're
Thank you so much. As well. So we'll be in Sorry
Yes.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
We have to thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Mr. President, I would say when she's here, I don't complete.
I don't want
Never. That is how they have to be but also basic practice. She also.
Yeah, guys, and a lot of us are very, very. So like our
Yeah, but no, this is a big.
very occupied by the British. So then it's very difficult for us to actually learn second languages. But if I want to get a young
Politics is.
Although they go ahead and take the one that event and we say, minister.
That's why I was like,
Yeah, something or the other. Rather than the person WhatsApp me and said, you know, sorry, that's they speak like it is so funny. True, true. But thank you so much to you and your team and someone in the. So we're looking forward now to the next. Happy birthday. I am Rebecca. I'm working this out. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Fantastic event. So looking forward to Chef September event. I'll really try and pressure her into doing it. So we have our people coming. So you
Could be better than it
Oh, thank you so much. I've heard it before, but it never makes sense to me. Anyone who knows me, voice motivation.
Yeah, with that English as well. And then all of a sudden we have, so not just like multiple, you know.
So much. Okay, let's get back to go.